Hello, I'm Scott Wheeler, the host of the Northeast Kingdom Voice and the publisher of Vermont's Northland Journal. Newport, Vermont is at a crossroad in its history. Today's guest on the show is Paul Monette, the mayor of the Lakeside community. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Scott.
You know, Paul, when you were elected, did you ever think that you were going to be leading the charge at such a transformational period of time?
No, I did not. A lot's changed over the years. I actually got elected kind of, not really on a whim, but I was urged to run, and I hadn't really taken it that serious at first. I said, well, I've only been back in the area a few years, and all of a sudden, someone said, you ought to put your name in, and then I was elected, and been on the council ever since, and now in my third term as mayor.
Tell me, has there ever been any nights where you've woken up in the middle of the night and said, what am I doing?
There's been a few nights like that with some of the projects that we've had that have been a little more controversial. The water meter issue, and because now we have the Long Bridge project, which once in a while I'll say, oh boy, am I going to survive the 18 months that the bridge is going to be closed?
That's a long time. So let's back up a little bit, and who is Paul Monette? Are you a local boy?
Yes, I was born on the east side of Newport, actually just a few streets down from the station. Attended public schools in Newport, from Newport City School right up through North Country. Received my degree in meteorology in 1982. Left the area for 9 years and went to Boston. Got sick of the rat race and I ended up traveling all over the country continuously, and that got tiring, and I wanted to come home.
Now, did you serve on the council, or did you just become mayor?
I served on the city council from 1997 until 2009.
Right. Is there much of a difference between being the mayor and being a councilman?
I think mayor, you have to go out and meet people. I know I've made it much more active. I've attended a lot more meetings. I think I've gone to Montpelier quite often. To stress Newport issues and concerns. Mayor, of course, you have to run the meeting, and you have to keep it under control. If you have a crowd at the meeting, you have to kind of keep it under control, know when to politely cut people off if they're starting to repeat themselves and things like that.
So what are the challenges you're facing right now?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is, of course, the Long Bridge. The city, that's been in the planning stages for several years, and it's finally coming to fruition now. And it's a work in progress, and we knew there would be traffic issues, as we know. Right. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing this summer is the bridge, with only the Causeway Bridge. And we've already run into a few issues with the traffic lights.
Right.
One of the traffic lights happened to fail and act up. And so there's going to be different issues with that throughout the summer.
You know, why is it, the question I'm hearing is, they built the bridge over Lake Champlain like in 2 years. Why is it taking 18 months to make such a small bridge?
It's regulations on the permit. They have restrictions. I know I've had to explain quite a few people that they have to be out of the water by March 31st because of the fish run. And I'm not sure how long the fish run is, but it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 months, right. I believe. I'm not a fisherman. Well, it's been years since I've been fishing. And that delays the project 2 months there, and then I think they have to do it in the fall again. Right. And so if you're losing 4 months, that's adding on to it. And then there's some other restrictions that I think when they did the Lake Champlain Bridge, my gut feeling is they cut a lot of corners, and then the regulatory agency said, no, we're not going to do that anymore.
Right. That's the one thing about serving in public office is, there's always people there to second guess you, which I'm sure you don't mind questions. But on the other hand I'm sure you're not just sitting on your butts and just kind of chuckling knowing that the bridge is going to be closed for 18 months, because you have to live with it too.
Oh, that's true. And a lot of preparation went into it and thought. Because we all knew that we only have one route now through town. And we knew that traffic was going to be an issue. And I know the fire chief and the ambulance people met with the construction folks to get ideas on how they can control traffic and things like that. It's hard when you have to replace a bridge. It was scheduled to be replaced years ago. And if they had done it years ago, they wouldn't have to completely tear it down now. Now, of course, it has to be completely torn down, new pilings and everything put in from scratch. So that adds to the project.
To be realistic, that isn't really that old of a bridge either. Like 60 years old or something. Of course, I don't know how old a bridge is supposed to be.
Well, they say this one should last 80 years.
Right.
60 to 80 years, depending on how you maintain it.
Right.
And so it's reached its useful life. I know I went under it a couple years ago in a kayak, and I looked up and I saw the condition underneath, and I said, They said that would look worse than what it really was, but the whole bridge needs to be replaced. I know they talked about, years ago, they said that it was unsafe and they were going to have to shut it down, and they end up not having to do it.
Tell me, what about the Causeway Bridge? Because I know that one was wiped out during the flood of 27. How's that bridge doing?
That's doing very well. That was redone a few years ago.
Right.
And then, so that bridge is fine. One thing they say is once you have a bridge, you should make sure every spring to wash the salt off it.
Right.
And that's something part of the bridge maintenance program that I know with the new bridge, we're going to make sure of that.
So how long is that bridge going to last?
The
new one.
The new one? I believe the figure I heard was at least 80 years, 75, 80 years, if you properly maintain it.
So do you figure you'll be around in that time to...
No, because I figured 70, 80 years, I'd be 132.
Right, okay, so I doubt you'll be there.
No, I don't think you will either.
Well, I'd like to think I was.
But that's true.
No, tell me, what about going through, there's been another question. Why can't people go through Gardner Park as a detour?
We talked about that. It's very narrow through there, and there's so much activity in the summertime with kids running around and the ball fields being used very heavily. We just felt it wasn't a viable option. And for the little bit of time you would save from going either the access road to the causeway, it really wouldn't save a whole lot more time. The key, I think, is with the traffic flow is to get all the traffic lights working properly, and they are adjusting them and doing things like that. We knew from the beginning that would be an issue.
Right. Now, have we just become spoiled? Because I can't picture what the traffic's going to be like, but on the other hand, when we were kids growing up, when they had a railroad yard, an active railroad yard, I remember sitting in traffic watching the trains go by for a long time, and then you would have a whole long line of traffic. So is this really going to be a problem?
I don't think so. I think people will have to plan. But I think we have more people traveling through Newport on the way to work than maybe back when we were kids. I think we have a lot more cars and things like that. But I remember the trains. They were, 100-car trains at least, and you'd be waiting and waiting. And so I think we know the certain times of day when it'll be bad. I think once school gets out and you won't have all the people at the schools, the buses and all that, that'll help alleviate some of the traffic.
Right. And I think when we were kids, we didn't mind sitting there watching the trains go.
Right.
We weren't in a hurry to get anywhere. So, what I've done is, as you said, I've just learned to know where to go and when. And if I want to get over to Newport Center or J, I just take a back way around Newport. But for the most part, other than your witching hour about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is always a challenge, I haven't seen a lot of change yet.
It was in the morning, around 7:30 it can be, but I think the big issue I got caught in the traffic the other day, and it was because of the traffic light acting up, the one traffic light.
Right.
One thing that a lot of people have asked is, how come a temporary bridge wasn't built? Well, that was going to add probably $2.5 million roughly to the cost. It was, there was no room with the grain company, because they got to remember, we got operating businesses there. You got Bond Auto and all that, and Bowling Grain, and they have to keep operating. And I know they made special accommodations for the grain trucks, because they ship a lot of grain out in the morning, and they didn't want that being backed up. So that's why you see people with traffic signs there too.
Right. All right, let's switch over to another topic. The day of this recording, I picked up the Newport Daily Express, and I saw a proposal to have Walmart on Main Street or Coventry Street. What do you think about that idea?
That's an idea that the gentleman from the Historic Preservation took upon himself. It's intriguing, but it will not work with the amount of traffic in that location. The proposal called for tearing down, the NEKLS building, the current bank, the post office, and I just don't see it working. And he's coming at it without even, that came out without even the council seeing it or the Derby Select Board. I had a call, I'll be honest, yesterday, what's your comment about the proposal? And I hadn't even seen it. And so it's Mr. Brune trying to have his way, dictate what he thinks is best for us, and because he doesn't even live around here. He lives over in Burlington area. And, and I think that frustrates people when you have people, I hate to call them outsiders, but yeah, outside the area trying to tell us, where things should go. And the proposed location of the current Walmart is actually closer to our downtown than the one in Littleton.
Right. And I think that you have a good point about even those of us on different sides of the issue on Walmart is, I think most of us want this to be a regional decision. And I don't mean local decision in the sense of, I think, whether it's in Newport, if it's in Newport, I think Derby in Coventry ought to have discussions, and I think if it's in Derby, I think we ought to be thinking regional, but I don't consider Burlington as part of our region.
No, and that's what a lot of people get frustrated with, because his group comes in and they can delay the project through the Act 250 process, and I mean, it's an intriguing idea looking at it, but I just don't see the physical space either. I don't know if he's accounted for the railroad tracks behind the building with that whole diagram. I really couldn't tell from the diagram, but that really is a tight space. All I know is that I'm hearing every day from people, when are we going to get a store to replace Ames? Because there are some things you just cannot get locally. People tell me that, and having to drive, to Littleton or St. J, Littleton, or even up to Sherbrooke or Magog, that's hardship for people.
Right. Now, you've in the past have been accused of being anti-Walmart. What do you have to say about that?
I have never been anti-Walmart, even though I think some people have felt that way, only because I do support our local merchants too.
Right.
I believe you can have both.
Right.
I mean, I traveled to Littleton and I talked with the local merchants, when after Walmart went in, just to see what they're doing. And if you go down to Littleton, their main street's booming. Right. And I think having the Walmart will draw stores into the Newport area, or even Derby, Newport, and downtown. A lot of people don't care for Walmart. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan, but I support it. I support it because we need a box store here. I mean, Ames was the busiest store in the chain. Right. And I mean, and when they went out, it was because the parent company went bankrupt. Right. And so, and no other stores have expressed an interest either. Right. Target hasn't come to Vermont. Kmart, that whole chain is in financial issues. So it leaves Walmart as far as trying to attract the box store.
And if people remember, if they have a little historic memory, is at one point the region was home to really several department stores.
We had Woolworths, we had J.J. Newberry's, we had W.T. Grant. Those were like your department stores, five and dime department stores. You had Forest Hills for a while. So yeah, we had several, and then we actually had at one time three or four shoe stores, right? And we had clothing stores, and so that's what's missing right now. I'll be honest, I don't think you can buy a tie locally.
Well, the thing to consider was, I know it's been said that Newport is anti-business, and that's why the business is left. That is not, why the new business is left. It was just a change in how the chain stores did business.
That's one thing, and then a lot of bankruptcies. I mean, one story I forgot to mention is we had Montgomery Ward's, which was actually 3 levels of regular, it could be a regular department store, but they basically went through a bankruptcy. Newberry's went bankrupt, that whole chain disappeared. I think most of those chains, Woolworths, they've all gone bankrupt. Right. And it's not because of, the stores didn't close here because of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you and I were growing up, and you know what? You're starting to get old when you start talking when I was a kid. But when we were growing up, Newport was still had a thriving Main Street. Do you think it will ever return?
I don't think it'll return to the extent as when we were kids with the variety of
Right.
stores, but it can be reinvented.
Right.
I believe it will start thriving. We can have specialty stores and things like that will do very well. So I think right now, I know it's been in the news about the tasting center, which will help draw people downtown, because you've got different restaurants downtown. But I think you're going to have specialty stores that will cater to the locals, but also to tourists and the like. Because I look at Littleton, they have a wide variety of stores, and their downtown competes not only with a Walmart, but with a Home Depot and a Lowe's. And so, but our unique business that's a staple to Newport is the pick and shovel.
Right.
I mean, you can go there and buy anything. I mean, I went in the other day and I found I needed a real obscure widget, and they had it, and it's like, and sometimes they don't have everything you need, but boy, it's pretty hard to get down there and not find what you need. And so they're a staple to Newport. People always come down, so we're going to go to the pick and shovel for ice cream. So, I think they're a good store.
Very few places you can go and get yourself a hammer and an ice cream at the same time.
That's right.
And the interesting thing about the Hamlet family is they will survive no matter what, because their family goes back generations in this region operating a store. Yeah, if Walmart comes in, there's no doubt that initially they will see some change. But on the other hand, I still believe that if you're doing a good job, which they do, they're going to survive, and then I think in the long run they will thrive.
Because I think the one big thing with having a box store or a Walmart or a box store is that people will tend to stay local shopping.
Right.
Because if you go down, right now I can't tell you the number of people who go down, you hear them say, well, we went to Littleton this weekend, or we went to Woodsville, or we went to Burlington to go to the Walmart or the stores over there. And so I think having it will help keep people shopping locally.
I agree, because right now it's, we have almost a generation now that's grown up as it's an experience now. You leave town, you go to Littleton, and if we don't stop that drain pretty soon, that's all they're going to know, and then having to reel them back in to convince them to shop local. I personally try to shop local when I can, because as a businessman, I have a lot of business people who support me. And I think the other thing is, although I know you can't shop local all the time, we also need to remember those local businesses also finance like our baseball teams, our track events, and that's the other thing.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's amazing how much the local businesses do support the various events. I mean, I look at our rec department and all the support they get from the local businesses, and like you said, the baseball teams and things like that. So I think the key is to try to keep people shopping locally. And as we know, when we were kids, not everyone had a car to leave town either. When everyone started getting cars and it became, hey, let's start driving out of town. That happened, in the early 70s. That's the thing when you started seeing a lot of downtowns start to get out. As people started to say, they became more mobile, is what it is. And so I think the goal is to try to keep people shopping local and helping the local economy.
So, what I'd like to know is who had the brainstorm, must be back in the 50s or 60s, to cover all the facades with tin that we are slowly getting rid of? Because when we were growing up, there was a lot of tin on the fronts of the stores, and I thought that looked hideous. And I think we've come so far from the days of tin. Do you have any love for that tin look?
No, and that's why I was glad. If you look at the Montgomery Ward building, the owner of that building took off all that tin and went back to just the brick and nice woodwork and all that. So no, it's amazing what they covered up with tin or false ceilings. Look at the library, how that whole ceiling was covered up. And, I think there was a period of time where they put in false ceilings and lowered the ceilings during the energy crisis to save. But the tin on the front, that I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that was, whether they felt it would be probably for maintenance. They said, well, tin will last forever.
You know, but you know, you mentioned the Montgomery building. You know, there really are a lot of people in the area who are working silently to improve the place, whether it's Newport or the surrounding community. You take Rick Woodward, you hardly ever see him in the news, but the guy is just constantly working to improve it. That building, look what he did to that building. Now he's bought the old Newport Express and Standard building on Central Street, and when he fixes them up, not only does he bring them up to code, but he also maintains their historical nature, or he brings it back. It's like, for example, he was telling me when he restored the Montgomery Ward building, some people said to him, well, you're going to take off the Montgomery Ward word, and aren't you? And he says, oh no, we'll even brush it up a little bit if necessary, because that is, even though Montgomery Ward hasn't been there for a long time, seeing that sign, you know, to those of us who grew up here is just like, just a bit of our past.
I've got people who say that he should paint the sign.
Yeah. Actually, Rick
excuse me.
Rick said that if it starts to fade too much, he will paint it.
Because it is part of the history. That's what I keep telling people. We have to look to the future, but we can't forget the past. That's one thing.
It.
And that's where I have to compliment you with your publication, because you really are interviewing people and putting down on paper the history of the area, and I think that's vital as we look to the future. And you know,
well, I appreciate that, because I try to record the good and the bad, because we can learn from it. You know, when we talk about the city of Newport, though, I feel that we can't forget Jay Peak. There's a multi-million-dollar expansion going up there. We're bringing in people from around the world, people who just might want to, you know, buy summer homes here, maybe move here. I just don't think that 25-mile distance is too far for them to want to explore.
No, it's not. Excuse me, I've had this cold, so you have to bear with me. But no, it's not. And the work that Bill Stenger's doing, I mean, he's bringing the biotech in, which, you know, it's taking longer than we had hoped, but there's regulations that he has to go through. And I know the property's been purchased, so that's it was just in the paper how they've got people looking how to bring it in, and we've got that new company moved into the old teddy bear factory, Numia Medical Technology, which is a growing company. And so things are happening. I mean, it takes time, unfortunately. Sometimes I get frustrated and I wish it would happen overnight, but we all know it can't. I think there's a lot of positive things, and there's a lot bright future. I wouldn't say just for Newport, but for the whole area.
Right. Oh, I agree with you, because I've been accused at looking through the world through rose-colored glasses, but in reality, I think things are starting to improve. Because you know what? Even if we look back at our own youth, things weren't quite as good as we like to think of them as, because I feel the poverty that was in Newport when we were younger was far worse than than ever today.
Right.
You know, we talk when people talk about Newport, they often talk about the downtown. You know, I grew up in Skunk Hollow, and we were the children of the working poor. I didn't know one person who didn't work, but you know, we struggled for everything we got, and I think a lot of us are better because of it. But you know, sometimes we like to reminisce back on our youth, and we remember the good things. But you know what is overall, I think Newport and I think the region has come forward a great deal.
I agree. I look at it this way. I know we talk about Newport, but I think what's good for Newport is good for the region. What's good for Derby is good for Newport. We have to look at this as a regional effort for the whole area.
Exactly.
And not just, well, me. Like I look at Jay Peak, yes, like you said, 25 miles away, but I know people from there are coming down, you know, to Newport and to the area, because we've got the beautiful lake, too, that we have to take advantage of.
Right. Okay, on to the lake. What's happening with the project where the waterfront plaza is now?
I haven't heard too much recently. I know this. I know Bill Stenger and Tony Pomelo are still talking and working on plans, but I really haven't heard anything with what's going on over there right now. I know they did test borings last year for their architectural drawings and things like that for soil testing, but from there I really don't know. It's been rather quiet, but I think probably because Bill's been so busy at JP. That's my opinion.
Right. And I bet you they had to go down really deep to find bedrock there, just because of the nature of that site.
They could. I know if you look at a good majority of Newport, it's all filled ground between sawdust, the old sawdust plywood mill that was there, and a good chunk of Newport's filled ground. You probably wouldn't be able to build Newport today, with the regulations.
Well, you take Gardner Park. That was once a swamp and a dump, and now you look at it today. It's it's a beautiful park. That's how come when I saw in today's paper that Tony Pomelo was quoted as saying they ought to put Walmart there. Yeah, I kind of cringed because I think you guys worked hard to make that beautiful park.
And I think you'd run into a major nightmare in cleanup.
Oh.
Because I've heard stories. I mean, nothing actually, they say there's nothing leaking in the river and all that from way back. I mean, that was years ago and it was a dump because they used to burn too. But they used to put everything in there from automobiles.
Oh, sure.
And I know talking with Brian Eldridge, who worked there for years, you wouldn't go very far and sometimes you'd hit the top of a car. And so I think it's better it's a beautiful park. It's, leave it alone. No, I can't see developing Gardner Park. It won't work because it's so wet too.
Sure.
So yeah, it was the old swamp. And so, no, there's no way you could develop Gardner Park.
No.
And it's recognized around the state for the baseball fields, softball fields, and we have state tournaments every year now. And that's a nice economic boost to the area. And so we look forward to that every year.
Well, you have about another minute left. What would you like to tell the listeners?
I would like to basically say bear with us for this summer with the Long Bridge. I know it's going to be, it can wear on people, but it's a project that has to be done. And it's been in the planning stages, and the way I look at it is once it's done, and if we maintain it, we won't have to tear it up for 80 years. And so 18 months of inconvenience, I look at it the long term. And then we have the other project, which is the paving project, but that's going to happen at night, the council, with the paving of Main Street and 3rd Street. That will happen at night, but there again, if you look at it, once it's done, it'll last for years. And so that's the main thing. And then the only thing is, I think we have a bright future. I really do. With the potential businesses that are coming in, and there's been a lot of inquiries. Newport's been in the spotlight at some national conferences for what we're doing. We've led the state with our zoning changes and other things, and so we are actually being talked about around the country, being very progressive on things.
Okay, Mayor Monette, I would like to thank you for coming on, and I would like to thank the listeners for tuning in today.